Well, hey everyone, happy Thursday. Welcome to So What, the Marketing Analytics and Insights live show. I'm Katie, joined today by only Chris.
John is at Inbound.
He is. He is representing Trust Insights and Marketing Over Coffee at Inbound in downtown Boston this week. And so we're very excited to hear back from him, everything that's going on, what's new with HubSpot, and then just general catching up with people. So if you are in the area, go say hi to John. He's wandering around the Boston Convention Center today. On this week's episode, we are covering identifying generative AI use cases using a 2x2 matrix. We'll get to the 2x2 matrix in just a moment. But, we've covered AI use cases before. We've talked about them, we'll cover again what they are. But we wanted to take it up a notch by really helping you think about, okay, that's great. Now I know the use case, but what does that mean for my company? And so really finding a thoughtful way to assess whether or not the use case was going to be something you should prioritize. So Chris, where would you like to start today?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, one of the things I was delivering a lecture yesterday at Wheaton College, and one of the students asked the very salient question, what jobs is generative AI going to affect? And I said, only the ones that use language, which by the way is all of them. I can't think of a single career, even someone, like shoveling stuff, on side of the road, you still use language to do reports, to do your timesheets and stuff. You are still communicating because communication is such an integral part of who we are as human beings. And as a result, every job will be impacted in some way by large language models and generative AI. So the challenge is for executives, for decision makers, for leaders to figure out, what are the use cases, or the use case categories even, and then look at your organization and say, how do I even map this up? Because again, it's going to affect everything: your finance team, your HR team, your recruiting, your sales, your marketing, your operations. If the humans are involved, it's going to be impacted.
I think you hit on something that I think is a really important distinction. There's use case categories, and then there's the use cases within those categories. The use cases themselves are numerous, but they all have to eventually fall under one of the categories of generative AI. So, Chris, what are those 6 categories for generative AI as we start to think about the use cases?
The categories are generation, aka making stuff, right? Blog posts, emails, limericks, you name it. Extraction, where you have a pile of data in some text format that you need to get data out of. So if you've ever written or you've ever read a white paper and there's tabular data like buried in the PDF, like 22 pages down, you're like, I don't want to copy and paste that up by hand. A language model can go and fish that table out and make it machine readable for you. Summarization. So if you've watched any of our podcast episodes or previous live streams, you know that there are transcripts. Maybe even that's too much to consume. So you can take the transcript, put it into a language model, and say, just give me the high points. Like, give me the Cliff's Notes version of it. There's rewriting, where you can take text in any form and convert it to any other form. And this can be silly things like, hey, rewrite The Hobbit, but in emoji, right? But it can also be explaining concepts, re-explaining a concept. One of my favorites is, explain this in terms of pizza. And you'd be surprised at the number of very complicated things like quantum superposition that can be explained with pizza. Pizza is sort of the universal explainer. The 5th category is classification, where you can take bodies and chunks of text and classify them, categorize them. And the last was question answering, where you can take either the model itself or specific pieces of text and ask questions of it. So again, one of my favorite things to do with this, I was looking at an NDA the other day, and I'm like, oh my God, this NDA is like 27 pages long. I loaded it into a language model and said, okay, tell me how fair this NDA is. Is it bilateral? Is it equal? Or is it skewed towards one party or the other? Should I sign it? And that's an example of question answering. And again, across departments, if you think about it, if you're in accounting and you have an accounts receivable ledger, you might, to a private server, you might load that ledger and say, I want to ask questions of this ledger and say, well, what are the categories of expenses that look weird? So those categories help us understand how these tools work because they cover so much of just the ways we use language within business.
And, I would imagine that some of the viewers might be wondering, well, why do I need to care about the categories if I just have a specific use case? Well, if you want to catch up on older episodes, we actually think it was last week we might have done this. We actually did a head to head to head. No, it was a few weeks ago, a few tests of the different tools in terms of the different categories of uses. So you can catch that live stream episode at trustinsights.ai/YouTube because the generative AI tools that are on the market as of today have different strengths and weaknesses. And so if your use case falls under generation versus extraction, you're going to want to consider different tools. And that's why understanding which category the use case falls under first is going to help you decide which tool you're going to need to use. So, Chris, how do we get from use case categories into decision making? How do we bring it to a 2x2 matrix? What is a 2x2 matrix?
It's a consultant's best friend. No, a 2x2 matrix is you have two dimensions of some kind that you want
Mhm.
to simplify things. So cost versus quality, speed versus features, you know, pepperoni versus pineapple versus pepperoni, and on pizza. Uh, whatever the case is, you have two. Sometimes they're mostly two dimensions that you want to try and categorize different things on. And those two dimensions ideally are scalar. Like it's not just an either or, but it's, there can be variations. So again, if you're talking about things like cost versus quality, it's not just expensive or not expensive. It's like, well, this is $10 and the quality is here, and this is $100 and the quality is over here. And so, is paying the extra $100 worth it? It depends on how much more quality you get for that. And so that's a 2x2 matrix in its essence. And there are so many of these. Again, this is a consultant's best friend because even though it runs the risk of oversimplifying sometimes, it can take a very difficult um, or complex environment and just narrow people's focus just to get them to pay attention to a couple things that really matter.
Well, we've done this exercise. We've actually used the 2x2 method to help categorize keywords for SEO. So difficulty versus, now I'm blanking on the
Volume.
other volume. And so you would want to go after, for example, high volume, low difficulty, or if you were feeling really, ambitious, you could do high difficulty, low volume and try to create your own space. And so it's a way to categorize a lot of information so that you can prioritize it. And so today what we're going to do is we're going to look at some of the use cases for generative AI in terms of optimization versus innovation. And so these are things that we're looking internally. We're looking at the things that we do in a business, not necessarily the things that we're providing to our customers, but that will come into play in the conversation. We're focusing on, will this use case optimize what we do, which is to make it faster, to make it more efficient, to make the processes even more automated and repeatable, versus innovation, which tends to be a new spin on something we're already doing, something net new, something we haven't done before, something we haven't had the ability to do before. And so we want to start to break down the use cases into that 2x2 matrix. So, Chris, if I said to you, hey, I have a bunch of things that I want to do with generative AI, I'm guessing that you would say, great, let's put it on a 2x2 and figure out where it all nets out.
I would exactly do that, and I would say, maybe the easiest way to do that would be with something like, even just putting on Post-it notes on a wall,
Mhm.
can be one of those things. So let's bring up your standard 2x2 matrix, and then start talking about the processes that you have. Is it internal? Meaning it's not going to, it's something that the company does. Is it external? Meaning it's something that the company does with customers or clients or vendors or lobbyists or whoever inside or outside the company. And then to your point, is it making something existing better, which is
Mhm.
optimization, or is it bringing something new to the table? So, a real simple example, suppose you're an insurance company and you have elaborate insurance policies, and your call center is constantly swamped with people saying, I don't understand what's going on in my policy. I don't know if my policy does this. You recognize that that is consuming an inordinate amount of your time. So one of the things that you could do with a language model is have a chatbot, right? And you'd have that chatbot uh, for policies. Now, this is not something that's existing, right? This is something that would be net new, and it's something that's customer facing. So you maybe put that right there in that external innovation category because yeah, that's new. That's going to be different, but it could be a pretty big deal.
Well, so let's think about some of the classic use cases that we've been hearing. Um, Writing blog posts, writing anything. I want to replace all of my writers with a chatbot, with ChatGPT, with Llama. I think that is something that comes up a lot in conversation as companies are examining, should we bring in generative AI? So
Mhm.
writing content, I would argue that it's an internal optimization unless your company doesn't currently write any content at all. And then it sort of skirts the line of optimization and innovation.
I would say, it also skirts the line between internal and external because you don't just
Mhm,
write content for yourself. I mean, probably not. You publish on a blog for external use for maybe it's SEO benefits, maybe it's just,
mhm,
customer retention or customer care. But either way, that content's got to be out there doing something. You can't just sit on your hard drive.
right. Um, and so as we're putting the use cases here, would I'm guessing we would have first decided which of these boxes we would want to focus on in terms of where things land. So, for example, external and innovation, I'm guessing because it's customer facing and it's something new, is going to have a higher cost associated versus internal and optimization because it's something that's pre existing that we're just making a little bit better.
Not
It's
necessarily.
but these are the kinds of decisions or these are the kinds of context, data points that you would wanna have because I would imagine that this is a great exercise, but then if you don't know which box to focus on, then you just have things in boxes.
You do. And so I would almost liken this phase of sort of your AI strategy is this is almost like brainstorming. Like what
Mhm,
are all of our processes, right? And you just start slapping stuff on the wall and things, and then you could start saying, okay, well now let's start thinking which these things are, and go back to the old fashioned Eisenhower matrix, right? Urgent, important, and easy. How urgent is it?
mhm.
How important is it? And then how easy it is to do it. So a chatbot for policies, not super urgent, although your customer care center would probably disagree. Is it important for the customer? Yeah, to get right answers. And is it easy? It's not real easy to do. But the, going back to those three factors, it would be important to reduce call volume, right? So that you could save some money on your call center. And also, as long as it's giving the right answers to customers, it'll make customers happier. So with any of these tasks, and again, this is something that is not just marketing. This is department by department. Your HR department should be looking at all of its processes, right? Your sales department, your accounting department, your compliance department, your legal department. Everybody should be looking at their internal and external processes and saying, well, what do we do all day?
I can imagine a version of this, a 2 by 2, where it is, urgency and cost are the X and the Y. And so you can start to say, is it urgent, but it's high cost? It's urgent, but it's low cost. And then you can start to pick off those small wins versus it's not urgent and it's high cost. Those things go on the back burner. But I think you would need to go through this kind of categorization exercise first to even know what the things are.
Exactly. So let's think back to your pharmaceutical days. Um,
Mhm.
when you were doing that kind of work, what was one of the tasks that maybe was just a pain in the butt?
We had, and I don't know the full way to sort of like summarize this, but basically we had over we had almost 10,000 data points every single month that had to be cleaned by an SPSS syntax that was printed out and then manually processed. And so I guess data cleaning is the best way to put it. Um, because it was high volumes of data. We were constantly running out of server space because of how manual the process was. And so that to me would have been an internal optimization, which would have allowed for a higher volume of reporting. As it was, because the process was so manual, we could only offer, we like basically hit the wall in terms of resource time every single month.
When you said the words SPSS,
Yes.
SPSS is a programming language. It's a statistical programming language. To
Yes.
me, that immediately screams AI because it's a
Oh, sure.
language, right? And a language model can generate language. Code Llama or GPT-4 can write SPSS syntax really easily. And so,
Hmm.
yeah, to me, that would be, if that's a big pain, meaning it's important.
Hmm.
And you're running out of disk space, so there's some urgency there.
Yeah.
Um, but that's easy.
Well,
That
and
is
we couldn't scale it because we couldn't add on more reports. It's, I don't want to get too tangential, but I do recall these big binders of printouts of the SPSS syntax and someone going through with a pencil checking it for errors every single
Mhm.
month, because every single month when we ran it, we would get hundreds of errors in the SPSS syntax when it would pause, and then we had to figure out where it was and then update the master syntax. It's when I look back, it's bonkers. Totally bonkers. So yeah, data cleaning, uh, writing code for syntax. I guess it all falls under the same category.
It does.
The other thing was the actual write-up of the reports themselves. The reports themselves were about 50 pages long of Word docs. And so it was analyzing the data and summarizing it.
There's that word that tells us that's one of the 6 core use case categories.
Mhm.
Again, that goes squarely in the internal optimization. Although if the reports are going externally, it can
Yep.
go on that line there because customers are gonna see it too.
Oh yeah, they were external reports, not internal.
Mhm.
Um, there was one of the things that I was charged with was helping to identify early warning signals of substance abuse. So basically, I worked within opiates and stimulants. And so looking for conversations on chat rooms that people were, it was early indicators that the new opiate that just got released, even though it was meant to be non-abusable, is now being abused so that we
Mm.
could try to get ahead of it. So I guess it's internet scraping? I don't know.
No, that would be, that would be I would you could call it web scraping. I would just
Whoops.
call it, data acquisition.
Yeah. Again,
Eh
I remember sitting there with printouts of papers of like chat conversations and hand coding them, because we also did, we built our own sentiment analysis tool, but a lot of it was manual.
Mhm. Yep. What I find interesting is we've got a lot of stuff in 3 of the 4 boxes. That internal innovation doesn't have anything in it yet.
Right. And so
Um,
what's an example?
so an example would be maybe your team internally just needs something that doesn't exist. So I'll show you a really quick example here. I was working on someone asked, "Hey, would it be possible to make a mobile app? Can Chat GPT make a mobile app?" So I said, "Here's the requirements. Tell me what the thing, so the best option is the framework like Flutter. And here's all the requirements for it." So I said, okay, cool. Flutter sounds like a good choice. Then it says, okay, well, great. So here's the process. Set up this thing, set up your Google Sheet, start the back end, and then it starts giving me instructions. Okay, here's how you set up the Flutter project. Go download it, install it, and stuff like that. Here's how you do the Google Sheets integration. This is the code that you use. And I was doing this for about 20-ish minutes the other night, and it just for fun because as one does. Um, and in that time, with its help, I built a bare bones mobile app that can work on Android and iOS. Now, again, if we think back to our chart here, this app is not supposed to be for external use, right? It's an internal use for an organization. So something like that would be super powerful, right? So I'm going to put this here, internal app development.
Well, so let me understand though. The ChatGPT or Llama tool didn't build the app. It gave you instructions to build the app.
It gave me, and it gave me some of the code.
Instructions, yeah.
Yes.
Okay. But I think that just want to make that distinction is that these tools will not build you an app, but it will give you the blueprint to build the app at this time.
It depends on the language. So Flutter, no. If I had specified Python, the answer would be yes, because there's a system called GPT Engineer where you give it extensive requirements and it will actually write, build, and compile the code. It is a little buggy.
Well, and I can't
but
imagine that there's a UI for it. Like
oh, for the
they
actual
build the
system itself.
app and then yeah.
Oh, yeah. The system itself runs at the command line, but the final
Right.
app will have a UI. You will specify what you want in the UI in the requirements gathering.
And I think that this is another really good example as to why you would want to categorize the use cases under one of the 6 main categories because not all of the generative AI tools are going to be able to do that. They're not all going to be proficient in Python or, CSS or whatever the other Cobalt, all the other programming languages are. Some will handle it better than others. And if that becomes a real need for your company, you want to make sure you're choosing the right tool.
Exactly. So that's an example of an internal innovation, something that doesn't exist, but
Mhm.
could dramatically streamline the process. One of the things that has held companies back, and we're in this pile of companies, is you have an idea, be like, it's going to take 6 months to write the software and QA and deploy it and stuff like that. And we don't have that kind of time because we're all busy doing, paying work. With these tools and their ability to generate code, you can cut that time down by 2/3, 3/4, maybe even 10x, maybe 90% less time. You still have to spend time on it, but you can spend less time on it and do both innovations and optimizations. So we have, for example, we were talking about this a lot recently in Slack, our content curation software. So we built software years ago to do
Mhm.
content curation, and it was always a little buggy. Actually, it was more than a little buggy. It was always a lot buggy. And then about a month ago, something crashed. I remember going in and going, I gotta fix this thing. And then I'm like, wait, no, I don't. I'm gonna feed it to ChatGPT, to the GPT-4 model. And I fed it this. I said, here's the prompt, here's my PHP code, fix my code. Right? And it's like, hey, here's the 18 things you did wrong in this code. Great, just fix them all. And now it runs so much better. It runs faster. It handles errors better because it has error handling now. It didn't used to. And so even that's internal optimization. We can put
Mhm.
that on here and just sort of code maintenance. Um,
Mhm.
but that is an example of where even something that is so mundane is super, super valuable.
Mhm. And, having run software development teams, the QA team, especially so where I worked, we had about 20 software developers. We had 3 separate product lines plus all the internal things for the company and the website, and we had 2 QA engineers, just 2. And they were responsible for testing everything that
Hmm.
came, that got landed on their desk, and they were always backed up because, despite the product manager's best efforts to stagger the different product lines. It was myself and 2 others, and we always worked together to try to stagger so that we could share resources. Things happen. Things get backed up. Someone goes on vacation.
Mhm.
Code breaks. And so we were always behind schedule, especially when we came to QA because our QA team was top notch. They were very thorough, which meant it took more time and you had to get in line.
Exactly. Exactly. So the other thing I'm noticing here is that the external optimization bucket doesn't have anything really squarely in it yet, Katie.
Mhm.
Giving that some thought about something that's customer facing that could use some optimization, what comes to mind for you?
I was thinking about that, and it depends on your kind of business. So for us, I would think that an external optimization might be email deliveries, response times to, inquiries. So, for example, if we have a client who's high touch, who sends a lot of, different email threads, then is there a way to use one of these tools to, basically help with that customer response? Have some sort of acknowledgement. We got your email. The information goes into our task management system so that we can see it and get it faster. To me, that's an external optimization because the customer benefits. There's some internal, but the customer benefits mostly from, that relationship building. It doesn't replace the human, the account manager, but it helps make sure that their information doesn't get lost.
I would agree with that. I think it's a great use case. Another one, I mean, optimization's literally in its name,
Mhm.
SEO, search engine optimization. There are
Yeah.
so many ways to do SEO with these tools. One of my favorites for things like content creation is take the persona of the person that you think is your ideal customer and have the tools compare that persona and what they're likely to be interested in with the content you're creating and say, you know what? There's some words and phrases and concepts and topics that are just not in your content that need to be if you want to appeal to CEO.
Mhm. I would agree with that. And so when we start to look at all of this, we can see that we're very heavy on optimization and very light on innovation. And I think that that's one of the misunderstandings of innovation in general. I wrote about this a few weeks ago for the newsletter. If you want to subscribe, it's trustinsights.ai/newsletter. And the thing that is misunderstood about innovation is that innovation, a lot of people approach it of like, I'm creating something brand new that the world has never seen. And that's not necessarily true. Innovation is always built on the back of something that's pre-existing. It's finding a new solution to an existing problem. So, maybe, electric cars that drive themselves is an innovation, but having to get from point A to point B is not a new problem. So an electric car that drives itself is a new solution to an existing problem. And that's the difference. And that's the distinction with innovation. So when we look at innovation versus optimization, yeah, an internal app development, that's a new innovation because it doesn't exist to us. But developing an app is not a new problem. We're just finding a new solution to an existing problem. Our customers needing more efficient responses to their policies, it's not a new problem. It's a new solution to an existing problem.
For those of you who are not word nerds, innovation literally comes from Latin, from innovare, which is broken out in pieces, means to renew, to make something into something new. So it's not making a new thing, it's making something that's old into
Right.
something new.
And so with that distinction, it does not surprise me that the majority of use cases would be optimization versus innovation because what we are all collectively trying to do is squeeze more things into the same 24 hours. And so using systems like a chat GPT or a llama or stable diffusion or whatever, helps us get there faster, more efficiently. And that's the optimization piece. You're muted, Chris.
If you think about it, if you think about those 6 use case categories, those
Mhm.
6 use case categories really are about working with data you already have, right?
Mhm.
So generation, not necessarily. Generation is, hey, write a blog post. And you still have to provide a lot of information about that in your prompt. Question
Right.
answering is actually no question answering, even that you have to provide some data. You have to ask questions of something. You can ask them a model generically, but you're not going to get as good results as asking a specific knowledge base. The other tasks, extraction, summarization, rewriting, and classification, are inherently taking stuff you already have and doing something with it. So by definition, like you said, that innovation is going to be coming from transforming something old into something new.
And so when we think about, so we've been plotting these use cases on the 2 by 2, some of these are going to fall in the internal optimization bucket. And so you could look at this and go, okay, but that's everything falls into the same bucket. Now what do I do? So the next step that you would take is you would take those pieces that fall into that quadrant and then start to, dig deeper. Like, okay, so is data acquisition a higher priority than code maintenance? Or is, data cleansing more costly than writing content, and finding additional ways? So you'd start, as Chris is doing, you'd start a second matrix and you would start to figure out the categories. So we're going to do cost, um, versus, I would assume, value,
Yeah.
importance. Yeah. High importance, low importance. And that makes sense. So things that are low cost, high importance are what we would want to start with. Those tend to be the quick wins. So they're not going to cost you a lot of money, but you're going to get a lot out of it. And so,
So let's put
yeah,
all
if we
these.
take everything that isn't in the internal optimization,
Well,
then
let's
we're
take all these things off of
okay.
the grid here. Now, so let's take something like data cleansing, the idea of saving that time. It's important, right? Because it was costing
Hmm.
you an enormous amount of time. And
Yeah.
because SPSS, it's language based, that goes right there. High importance, very low cost, because
Hmm.
that's an easy win,
Right.
right?
Um,
Code maintenance, also an easy win. It depends on where your code fits, like how important your code is, but like that stuff for our content curation software, again, an easy win. The machines can do that.
I would also imagine that it also depends on how big your code base is. And the same as how big your database is that you're data cleaning. So, when I think back to that example, we had, tens of thousands of rows of data versus we're pulling this month's out of Google Analytics. Those are two very different data sets. And so we may have to start to break it down further of like the time invested. So it may feel like it's going to be low cost, but if you're going back through months and years of code or data, you're going to start to increase the cost.
Exactly. Chatbot for policies. I would say, that's of medium importance, but the cost is pretty high because you have to, do the embeddings, build a vector database, all that stuff. There's a lot
Mhm.
of infrastructure cost that goes with that. So that's fairly high cost.
And I would say internal app development is low importance, high cost.
Yep, I would agree with that. That is our employees are not quitting because of that.
We
Writing
hope not.
content is I would say probably in the it depending on how you're doing it, it can be somewhere along here.
Mhm. And I think it depends on what content you're writing. So if you're using the tool to write, a 300-word blog post, it's not going to cost you a lot. But if you're using it to write an academic paper that's thoroughly researched and cited, then you're going to have higher costs associated.
Exactly. Customer response, what example you were talking about,
Mhm.
to do it the way you were talking about it would require you to build basically build an AI app with LangChain and start chaining models together because you're gonna need a few different models to accomplish a few different tasks. So I would put that on the higher cost side. So, but how important is that to you?
Given that we are a service agency, I would say it's a higher importance because
Okay,
without customers, we don't exist.
right. Okay, so we'll put it there. SEO right now, where'd you put that?
I would put that in the upper half of the low importance.
So
And I
like
would
here.
keep it, I think it's lower cost
Yep.
because it's a lot of topic generation, keyword research, things that historically, aren't uh big cognitive overload. It's just a matter of finding the time to do it.
Hmm. What about data acquisition? That scraping you were talking about.
I would say that is, I'm going to guess that that's high importance but also high cost.
It depends. I would put it here because it depends on the kind of data and stuff.
Mm,
But yeah, it could be there. And then the report generation, just streamlining those reports.
I would say that's high importance, low cost.
I would agree. So what I find interesting is in the internal external innovation versus optimization, you definitely have things weighted towards one half of the board. When we put it in terms of um, cost and importance, we're actually pretty concentrated in the low cost, high importance quadrant. So, A, that tells me we did a good job of identifying tasks that are actually meaningful. But
Mhm.
B, that tells me there's a substantial opportunity for AI at our company.
And when you start to look at the tasks themselves, you can see there's a lot of overlap of the kind of thing, um, that we're needing to do. And so that's where sitting in the CEO seat, I would say, huh, what's going on with our data team that these are all the things that we need to be focusing on first? Are they overwhelmed with the amount of things? Or is this truly just an opportunity to bring in some automation? And I'm not saying like you specifically, Chris. I see you sort of smiling. Like I don't mean you specifically. I mean like if I were objectively looking at this as someone who isn't mean for not just insights, I would say, huh, I'm seeing all of our developer work, all of our analyst work. Those are the things that I should be paying more attention to. Do they have repeatable process? How much volume of things are they generating? Am I getting what I'm paying for? And is this a really good opportunity to bring in a lot more artificial intelligence?
Exactly. Katie, what would you say it is that you do?
I I just bark orders and boss people around and get cranky. That is all I do.
Uh, but no, I agree. There's a lot of things here where, and again, this is an exercise that every department in every company should do. It's not just marketing. It's not just engineering. It's not just IT. Everybody, HR should be
Mhm.
doing this because this is where you're going to see like this sector here, the low cost, high importance sector. If you can knock out these 5 tasks here, your business is going to grow, right? Your business is going to grow because you'll be much more efficient at things that right now consume a lot of time. They consume a lot of resources and they don't have to. You know, AI may not be able to do it all, but
Sure.
AI will certainly help the workers who are in those departments do their jobs better and faster.
Well, especially if you take like data cleansing, for example, there's a lot that could go into that. So if you start to pick apart the actual steps that go into the data cleansing, then maybe it's just, having AI do the SPSS syntax versus, you know, formatting everything. Like it really depends on what the task itself is. So I think that it should be looked at not as, oh crap, now this task is going to be taken by AI, but how can AI enhance this task so that I can focus on internal app development, so that I can focus on chatbot for policies because I'm no longer inundated with report generation.
Exactly. That's a great way of looking at it. If you can knock down this stuff that you know is consuming time and money and people, then other stuff that's on the board will get taken care of. It will actually get the attention it needs.
Mhm. I would agree with that. And so Chris, so it sounds like the first step for people who are interested in this kind of an exercise is to understand the 6 categories of generative AI uses. And so that's number 1. Number 2 is to then go through the exercise. You know, don't worry about getting it right or wrong, but just start to list out the different things that you think AI could be doing. It doesn't matter if it's a realistic thing right now, it could, because that could go into innovation, or if it's something you're like, if I could just get this machine to write these reports for me, I would be 10% less cranky. I would say that's high importance.
No, I think that's exactly it is to look at those processes and say the question that we ask when we do consultations like this is what processes are consuming the most time that are repetitive. Like every month I
Mhm.
have to do this. Like, okay, anytime I hear the word repetitive, that's like an alarm bell saying you need to be looking at a technology platform coupled with people and processes to reduce the burden that that repetitive process imposes on your organization. That's like the red flag that says, okay, the moment you say every month or every week or every hour, okay, that's something that we should be digging into. If you have something that comes along, once a year, like okay, maybe not. Maybe not. Again, it depends on the size of the task, but
Mhm.
those monthly reports, those QBRs, those things that everyone is saddled with.
Those daily
Yeah.
roundups.
Exactly. All that stuff, that is an immediate sign that there is some kind of process and platform that you can bring in there that will reduce the burden on the people.
And if you aren't even sure where to start, then we can help. You can reach out to us at trustinsights.ai/contact, where John Wall, who is not on this call today, our chief statistician slash all around swell guy, will be the one to talk you through what's possible. And if you just want to sort of hang with people who have similar questions to you, then you can join our free Slack community, Analytics for Marketers, at trustinsights.ai/analytics for marketers, where you can ask and help answer other people's questions. I think, Chris, we have 3,500 people in there now about that.
Yep, exactly. No, I think those are good places to start. But when we've done this consulting for others, the other thing that doing this sort of work does is really highlights opportunities for collaboration. And if you can use machines and technology to streamline that, to accelerate the speed at which you collaborate, you will get more done and be much more productive. I mean, it sounds so cliche, as consultants are want to do, but it's true. Knowing that this department and that department and this department all have exactly the same task in slightly different disciplines means that all three of those functions should be able to learn from each other and should be able to share best practices internally.
It's the reason that the phrase "many hands make light work" has stuck around for so long.
It's true. It's true. All right, Katie, it looks like folks have their homework cut out for them. And again, as mentioned, if this is something that you want to have done at your organization, we do this in half-day and full-day workshops and stuff. Let us know. Any final parting words?
Start planning, start experimenting, start brainstorming. This is a great exercise to do ahead of selecting a tool, because you don't want to pick the wrong tool and find out, oops, I just spent a lot of money on something I can't use.
Exactly. And we are recording this in September. This is the time of year when folks start thinking about annual planning and budgeting and forecasting and what the year ahead is going to look like. So this is a great time to be doing this kind of planning and analysis as well. So thanks for tuning in, folks, and we will see you next time. Thanks for watching today. Be sure to subscribe to our show wherever you're watching it. For more resources and to learn more, check out the Trust Insights podcast at trustinsights.ai/TI podcast, and a weekly email newsletter at trustinsights.ai/newsletter. Got questions about what you saw in today's episode? Join our free Analytics for Marketers Slack group at trustinsights.ai/analytics for marketers. See you next time.